So this conversation, like all conversations, needs to start with compassion. We're at a time in the world where we are so overwhelmed by loss, anxiety, uncertainty, and a sense of isolation. And yet we still remain optimistic. We remain optimistic, and we show that we are optimistic by bringing and welcoming new humans into our world on a daily basis. And that has to be probably the most optimistic thing that anyone can do, because we don't have babies so that we can enjoy them today. We bring little people into the world so that we can imagine them achieving the greatest possible lives that they can have. And that for me is the ultimate optimism. In my work, I have over the last 2 decades asked thousands of people to draw what it looks like when it's fixed for them, in their communities, in their schools, in terms of economic sustainability, in terms of developing communities, in terms of urban safety, in terms of rural problems. And I asked people to draw what it looks like when it's fixed. And the richness and diversity of what comes out of those drawings is quite extraordinary and endlessly intriguing. But the one thread that is in them all is that there are children. There are children laughing, playing on swings, running in grasslands, exploring under the sun, being loved and hugged and being nurtured. And that for me says that we remain optimistic, despite the fact that we are living with such overwhelm. So anxiety is my middle name. And when COVID came along, I was ahead of the curve. I was used to living with anxiety. And one of the ways that I learned to overcome it was to envisage what I wanted out of life, was to look at what it looks like when it's fixed for me. And the next step after we've developed a vision of what it looks like when it's fixed is to find out who shares that vision and to connect with those people so that we can each bring whatever is useful to help us get closer to the vision. So each of us needs to understand how it is that we can be useful. Being useful is in itself useful. Particularly in times of overwhelm and anxiety. There is nothing more calming and more helpful than understanding how we are useful. And part of the problem in our world today is that so many people don't have a particular function, don't see themselves as connected to an outcome that they believe they can achieve. And then there's climate change. If we didn't feel overwhelmed by climate change, that would be cause for worry and anxiety, because climate change is completely overwhelming. It's petrifying. Even imagining what's going to happen to our children and our grandchildren, let alone to ourselves, is really, really scary. And very often what we do when we see something that is so complex and so scary is that we try and hide away from it. We think that if we don't talk about it, if we don't engage with it, it'll somehow disappear. And yet we all know we're all carrying it on our shoulders. We're all carrying that anxiety. And so how do we address that? For me, one of the big issues is that we need to stop seeing life as a popularity contest. And we need to begin to hold each other accountable and ask other people to hold us accountable, and not take offence when people ask us to do the right thing, and expect others around us not to take offence when we ask them to do the right thing. So with COVID, for instance, if we're standing in a supermarket queue and there's a guy, I'm sorry, but it's always a guy of a certain age, and he's got his mask down around his chin, we stand there and we fume. I stand there and I ask him to put his mask up. And my husband says that one day, if I'm shot in a crowd, I'll know that it's somebody I've asked to put their mask up. But life's not a popularity contest. And that guy wearing his mask is a matter of life and death, potentially. In exactly the same way, allowing someone to use plastics and materials that are both unnecessary and that will stay with us in our world and build that landfill to a point where we can no longer see the land and change our oceans into fields of plastics. That's a matter of life and death for us and for our children and for our grandchildren. And if we want to have grandchildren, then we need to do something about that today. The initial response when we decide to do something is almost invariably greater anxiety. So we're going to go on a roller coaster where in the beginning we get inspired and we say, I can do something here. I can be helpful. I have a vision of what it looks like when it's fixed, with my children grown up, their children grown up, their children, happy babies playing in a beautiful ocean on beautiful grass. But immediately after that, I'm going to start to feel that downward motion as I worry about whether or not I can do anything about it. And that's when we have to really trudge through the hard stuff, where we have to say, in any change, there is loss. And if we want behavior change, we're going to have to cope with a whole lot of loss. We're going to have to change a whole lot of things. But if we hold a vision of what it looks like when it's fixed, and it's a vision worth achieving, then surely we can actually climb through those bottom bits. My belief is that when we are overwhelmed by complex problems, we can never do it alone. We have to do it together. And so for me, the first step is about saying, I'm going to live in a certain way. I'm going to reject products that have very heavy packaging. I'm going to think twice about using anything in plastic. I'm going to walk instead of driving when I can. I'm going to think twice about where I take my holiday. I'm going to use as little water as I can possibly use. I'm not going to do the things that take me away from my vision, because I believe in my vision and I believe it's worth achieving and I believe I can be useful. But I'm not going to do this alone. I'm going to speak to everybody that I love, everybody that I work with, everybody that I engage with, even the guy in the supermarket with his mask around his chin. And I'm going to say, let's do this together. Because if we do it together, it's going to be that much easier. I've seen people achieve the most extraordinary things in collaboration. And I really believe in collaboration. The work that we do is based entirely on the notion that ordinary people can achieve exceptional things if they collaborate. Collaborate doesn't mean consult. It doesn't mean ask questions. It doesn't mean tell people what to do. It doesn't mean coordinate and try and get other people to do things in a way that makes sense for you. It means working together. It means assuming that everybody around you brings something that you can't bring. It means that we embrace the diversity of the way that we all can approach problems. And it means sharing our vision so that we can find the synergy, the point that we all converge on. And that, for me, is the optimism that helps us when we welcome new children into the world. I've been having a one-way debate with the city of Johannesburg refuse collection. Pick it up. It's one way because they never respond to me. They put up these endless posts on Twitter about how much garbage they pick up. They show these pictures of cleaning up the most disgusting sites, and they record how much they're picking up. And I keep saying to them, don't you want to record how little you pick up? Because that's when you'll be moving towards what it looks like when it's fixed. If you keep picking up so much garbage, all you're ever going to do is pick up so much garbage. And so for me, what we need to do is we need to be very clear about what it looks like when it's fixed. What it looks like when it's fixed is that there's less garbage. And so we need to invest not just in picking up garbage, but in changing behavior. And you and I can do that. We can do that because we believe in the future. We can do that because it's worth it. And we can do that because we want better for our children than we've had for ourselves. So as we contemplate what is so far in the world the biggest and most complex problem of all, climate change, as we contemplate the possibility that if we don't do something today, there might not be a tomorrow, and if there is a tomorrow, there won't be one for our children and our children's children, we need to take action urgently. But we also need to be incredibly kind to ourselves and to each other. We need to come back to that issue of compassion. We need to be respectful, caring, nurturing, and understand that this challenge is not one that's just going to go away, but that if we collaborate, if we do it together, we can surely reach what it looks like when it's fixed for all of us.